everyone. Welcome to Thought Leadership Thursday. My name is Richard Charpentier. I am a certified master baker and a bakery scientist with over 35 years of experience in the bakery industry, as well as a baker influencer. In this segment, Bakerpedia sits down with thought leaders in the baking industry to discuss leadership, bakery trends, and much more. Today, we are joined by Emily Kulaga, Global Marketing Manager at Vantage Food. Hello, Emily. How are you?
Hello. Good morning. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for joining us for Thought Leadership Thursday. It's a pleasure having you on the meeting.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited about our topic today.
So I wanted to know, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at your company and the type of products you sell at Vantage?
Sure. So I have been in the food industry for a little over 10 years. I am the global marketing manager at Vantage Food. And Vantage Food has been in the food industry, primarily in baking for a number of years, starting back with the Mallet and Amarna Coat companies all the way back, all the way as far back as the 1930s. So, we bring generations of brand history and quality to our customers, as well as a number of solutions for bakers, such as oil and water-based release agents, emulsifiers, icing stabilizers, all kinds of things that really help bakers consistently produce quality products day in and day out, and really help make their lives a lot easier.
No, thank you. Yeah, and as a baker, I'm very familiar, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are familiar with Vantage and Vantage Foods products in their bakeries. Thank you for the explanation. And I know today we wanted to talk about sort of consumers and trends with you. And I was reading an article recently that was saying by 2035, the largest global population, meaning in the world, will be the Gen Z. Can you explain what the Gen Z is and sort of the food trends around the Gen Z you've noticed?
Sure. So I know in the food industry, we've spent many years talking about millennials. So if you haven't paid attention to Gen Z before, this is definitely the time to start, because the oldest members of this generation are in their early to mid 20s. So they are here. They were born between 1997 and 2012. That varies depending on the source that you're looking at. It may vary by a couple of years, but generally speaking, late 90s through the early 2010s. Currently, they make up about 20% of the U.S. population. This is the most ethnically diverse generation that we've seen so far. And the really key thing about them is that they're tech natives. So they don't know a world without the internet and cell phones. They're very much entrenched in the digital space. This is like second nature for them. I remember I have a nephew that by the time he was 2, he was using an iPad, which just kind of blew my mind a little bit. I come from the millennial generation and the older millennial generation that really didn't grow up with technology. We sort of saw technology coming to life right before our eyes. So Gen Z is a little bit different from millennials in that sense, in that this is they were born immersed into this world. And because of their age, they will be coming into their spending power by about 2026. So, the eldest of this generation are just starting out in the workforce. And there's a lot of Gen Z behind them that will very shortly be in the workforce and have that discretionary money to spend. So this is a big group and definitely one you want to pay attention to.
Good explanation. And for those who didn't know about the Gen Z, and I have children, so I sort of understand, the changes in behavior. So, what do you think? We're talking about the Gen Z, but what do you think the Gen Z food preferences and food habits will be different, let's say, than previous, the Gen X, all the different other generation, the baby boomers today?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So I'll kind of dig into each of these, but kind of the four key things that Gen Z is looking for. Number one is flavor. Number two is value, and I'll kind of explain how they may think about that when they're making food choices. Nutrition and satiety is very important to them, and then connection as well. So in terms of flavor, they're really looking for those spicy, bold, ethnic flavors, but also indulgent. So Gen Z is a group that wants to treat themselves, and they want to give themselves permission to indulge, and not feel bad about eating an ooey gooey donut in the afternoon. This is something they see that as a treat. But they really like those spicy, bold flavors, and sometimes the spicier the better. So anytime, this is something that I think we can incorporate into our industry very easily, in different ways. As far as value goes, this is not just about discounts, although, Gen Z does love getting a discount. This is really about getting the most bang for their buck. So it's more about perceived value than actual dollar value. If they feel like they are getting their money's worth out of something, they're very savvy in terms of what they're looking for, and the cost analysis the cost benefit analysis that they do with their food. So if they feel as though they're getting a good bang for their buck, that's something that's going to appeal to them. So anytime we can play up sort of the value that we bring to this generation, that's going to work really well in our favor. From a nutrition perspective, they're looking for things, and this kind of ties a little bit back into value. They're looking for foods that don't just feed them, but kind of nourish them. So we've seen a huge rise in functional ingredients, particularly over the last couple of years with the pandemic. This sort of came out of the pandemic era, but really looking at functional ingredients. So things like protein and fiber and antioxidants that are some of those immune boosting ingredients, things that really provide that fortification, that are nutrient dense, so that they can stay fuller for longer. By eating, the foods that they eat will keep them fuller for longer. So that's a better value for them, because they can spend the money on a food once that keeps them fuller longer. They don't have to spend as much money later on. And it really gives them that fulfillment and that fortification. And this is, we're seeing this trend across the board. So not just with Gen Z, but with all of the generations are kind of turning in this direction. So, I know we've all seen sort of the definition of healthy shift over the years. When I was younger, it was about, low sodium, low fat, no fat. Then it kind of shifted into low sugar, no sugar. Then for a while, it was about the different diets, the paleos, the ketos, which are still important. But I think moving forward, we're going to see a lot more of this mind-body wellness, where consumers are taking a really good look at what they're putting into their body, and how is that going to affect their mental wellness, their physical wellness. How can they eat foods that are going to keep them fuller longer and lead to a better overall well-being. And Gen Z is definitely leading the charge on this one. So those functional ingredients are going to continue to be really important moving forward. And then the last thing that they're looking for is that connection. They really crave that connection. And because of this, brand trust is really key. So if you want to be able to connect with Gen Z, they need to be able to trust your brand. So they want to know about your company culture. They want to see that you're being authentic. in both your messaging and your actions. If your actions don't match your messaging, they're going to pick up on that right away. So the trust in your brand is really how they're gonna connect with you, and that's going to encourage them to be invested in what you're doing and to spend their money with your brand. The other thing that's really interesting with this group, so even though they're tech natives, we have seen with them that products are more important to them than experiences. So with millennials, we saw that experiences were the big thing. So millennials wanted to take these maybe mundane tasks, maybe ordinary experiences that they had, and really turn them into something special. So you had a lot of movie theaters pop up that had where you would go for dinner in a movie. You know, you would watch your summer blockbuster with a glass of wine and a full meal. This really turned the movie going experience into an experience. Grocery stores, like the rise of Mariano's and the popularity of Whole Foods was kind of born out of this, where a mundane task like going to the grocery store suddenly turned into an experience where you can take a break and have some lunch and eat some sushi and maybe have a cocktail while you're doing your grocery shopping, really turning that into an experience. So millennials were all about the experiences. Gen Z is more about the products. Because they're kind of inundated with these digital experiences all day long. They get experiences constantly. They're kind of reverting back to this idea of really looking at the products. What am I actually spending my money on? I don't want to spend it on an experience. I want to know what I'm spending my money on. So they want that tactile interaction with products. So they want to see it, they want to smell it, they want to hold it in their hands. And more than any other generations, they prefer that in-person brick and mortar shopping experience. Now, don't get me wrong, they are still very heavy users of online shopping and delivery and Instacart and all those sorts of things, but they do prefer that in-person experience, which, I mean, that's great for our industry, because the baking industry is all about that see it, smell it, hold it in your hands type of idea. That plays really well into what Gen Z is looking for. I mean, I remember as a kid going into the local bakery when we would go to visit my grandparents. And I still have very visceral memories of walking in and being sort of hit with that sugar rush. That sugar rush hits your nose, and the sights of all of the donuts and the cookies, and that smell of baked goods and the flour and the sugar and everything. I have great memories of that, and that's the kind of thing that Gen Z is craving right now. They want that personal in-person interaction with your food. And so that's awesome for our industry. You can have the prettiest picture in the world, but there's nothing like that kind of in-person sensory experience that you get walking into a bakery. So it's a little counterintuitive, but that's great news for our industry moving forward, that this generation wants that brick and mortar experience.
Oh, that's quite amazing. It's basically, it seems like I grew up, in Europe, going to the bakeries, and it seems like where Gen Z is going back to changing the values again, and have the connection, and one, food that is will satiate them, and will be good experience for them, but no more for the food and reading the ingredients. And sort of the brick and mortar, as you mentioned. But do you think that the social media, it plays a big role for the Gen Z population today in terms of influencing them?
It does. It absolutely does. But here too, Gen Z is not. They're not really interested in a lot of the big platforms that are out there, with the exception of maybe Instagram. I think they're pretty heavy users of Instagram. They're not flocking to Facebook. They're not flocking to a lot of these other big tech platforms out there. They really, again, this goes back to that connection. They want that smaller, more intimate connection in their online experiences. I think I've heard it described as digital campfires. So they want something to be a little bit more personable than what a Facebook or a tech giant has to offer. And so they're looking at they interact a lot on streaming services, on gaming platforms, and anything that's kind of offbeat. They really kind of like that because it feels smaller, and they feel like they can get more connected on those in those more intimate ways. But so yeah, I mean, I know for a lot of our audience that that may not it may be a little bit more difficult to find some of those smaller areas that they're looking at. It may not be feasible to spend money on advertising on a gaming platform. That's that may be out of reach. But Instagram is a great way to connect with Gen Z. It's a very visual platform, and it allows you to post pictures, to post videos, to really tell your story, to tell your brand story. And that's what they want. They want to get to know your brand at a really basic level. So you don't have to have professional photography or be a great videographer to really show off your food and your brand. They want those smaller, more intimate stories. Having someone walk around your bakery with an iPhone, showing your staff doing what they do every day, or showing your baker frosting a new batch of cupcakes, or pulling a batch of donuts out and talking about how great it smells, and hey, you guys need to come in, this is a great new flavor that we're trying, you guys need to come in and smell it for yourselves, taste it for yourselves, that type of thing. 15-30 second videos that really showcase your personality, highlighting some of your employees throughout the day, or throughout the week. Even it doesn't even have to be a daily thing. Showcase your head baker, showcase your counter staff, showcase some of the faces behind your brand. That's going to go a long way into helping you connect with Gen Z, and they really gravitate towards that type of thing because it's authentic.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It seems like the Gen Z is very different, and I'm a Generation X, I believe that's what I am. It's a different values, but the Gen Z is really into, they want the true story. They want, to connect with it. But how about sustainability? I know everybody's talking about sustainable approach, etc. It's even with airlines. How do they fit the Gen Z generation with sustainability today?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So sustainability seemed like it was on a tear for a long time there. And then we sort of ran into the challenges of the last couple of years. And it's kind of fallen off a little bit. There are other priorities for both us as manufacturers in the baking industry, as well as consumers. There are other priorities that are kind of taking the forefront here. But I think sustainability will eventually come back. As the industry continues to stabilize, I can see it coming back, and Gen Z is definitely going to be leading the way here. They were sort of at the forefront of this movement, initially, and I believe they will be as well. And there's a couple of things to think about here. So, the way that consumers think about sustainability is maybe a little bit different than the way we might think about it in the industry. So, consumers think about sustainability in terms of, transparency, transparency of ingredients. Where are the ingredients coming from? They like being able to trace their ingredients as well, which, I know for us is, maybe not necessarily as feasible on the industry side of things. They want to know, the impact that the products that they're buying have on the environment. They want to know, how much water is being used, that type of thing, what types of resources are being used. So there are very specific things that consumers think about when you say sustainability, or when you mention sustainability. For our side on the industry, I think the focus in sustainability is more around sustainable operations. So this is things like, making sure that our equipment is running as efficiently as possible for as long as possible. there is a waste component here, making sure that we're reducing our waste as much as possible, both in, in the product waste that's just sort of a natural occurrence in the production process, but, also in terms of like, water reclamation, how much of the resources and ingredients are we using, and really getting down to that efficiency within our operations. I don't think that's a bad thing, though. I don't think it's a bad thing that there's a discrepancy between the two, because again, for Gen Z, that authenticity is key. So if you can be clear about what sustainability means to you as an organization, and then the kinds of things that you're doing to promote your sustainability, that's gonna go a long way with Gen Z. You're gonna get the credit for that if you can be clear about what it means to you and what you're doing, and communicate that to the consumer. That's going to go a long way. So even though it may not directly match up with what they're looking for from manufacturers, they will appreciate the fact that you're doing something and that you're being authentic. So if you are doing things right now today within your organization that sort of that you feel matches that's your idea of sustainability, you can start communicating that right now. So even though sustainability is not top of mind for everybody, you can still kind of start communicating that and start getting that message out there, because it will come back eventually. If this isn't something that you have thought of, or if now is still not the right time for you to be thinking about that, that's okay too. Just when it gets to that point, just make sure that you're very clear about what sustainability means to you and your brand, and communicate that in a very transparent and authentic way. And that's that will be very appealing for Gen Z and for other consumers as well.
Good explanation, and I hope everybody will take good notes. I didn't realize that transparency for the Gen Z generation was crucial, and it's a lot of good information. So we're talking about the Gen Z and how influential they are. So let's pretend we have a crystal ball and we can look into the future. What's your take on future for all the bakers listening to the show? How do you see the baking industry in the future with the Gen Z, and how is this going to change?
I think we're going to continue down this path of spicy being a really appealing thing for them. Now, how spicy is too spicy, I think that remains to be seen. I mean, short of straight up eating a ghost pepper, I don't know how much spicier we can go. But we may see a little bit of a shift, especially as Gen Z gets a little bit older. We may see a bit of a shift towards more like flavorful spice. So things maybe like horseradish or wasabi, or even sriracha, something that has that spice, but is also flavorful as well, so that it doesn't burn your taste buds off. So, I can see, something like a honey sriracha continuing to be a trend, or continuing to appeal to this generation, because it'll have that heat, but it'll also have that flavor. And it's a bold type of flavor as well, and something that I think could be incorporated into some of our baking products. Like, I'm making it up, but maybe a honey sriracha donut is something that might be kind of interesting, and really kind of plays on that idea of mashups too. So taking a familiar format like a donut and combining it with an unexpected flavor or an unexpected ingredient like a honey sriracha, that might be something that's kind of cool, and that will continue through the industry. We'll continue to see things like, seasonal offerings, LTOs. Those seasonal flavors are always popular, and especially combined with LTOs. LTOs are important to Gen Z, or they like LTOs because it has a little bit of a sense of urgency. It's kind of that fear of missing out, where it's this really cool new flavor, or this really cool new offering, but it's only here for a limited time. So you kind of have to get on it, or you're going to miss it. That's very appealing to Gen Z. we're going to continue to see some of these collaborations and influencers. So influencers are definitely important to Gen Z. I'm thinking of things like, McDonald's has done a lot over the last couple of years, collaborating with influencers like Cardi B, and there's a number of other musicians that they've collaborated with, where the influencer will create a meal that's a special LTO at McDonald's, where you can go and get Cardi B's favorite meal, a burger and fries and whatever. That's really popular with Gen Z. That's something that they really like, because it combines two things that they're interested in: their influencers and their food. Now, I know that, in our world, it's maybe not as feasible to pair up with a Cardi B or a whoever, but if you can take that inspiration and kind of play off of that inspiration and play off of those influencers, I think that will continue to be very very rewarding with Gen Z. They will continue to gravitate towards that. Yeah, but those bold and spicy, those seasonal LTOs, those collaborations and those mashups, those things I can definitely see continuing forward as this generation matures and gets older.
Well, hey, honey, sriracha done it. You got me there. I'm ready to try. That's a good one that bakers should try playing around. And that sounds pretty good. So with all of the great information you're giving us, how can bakers today capitalize on, or your recommendation on how bakers can capitalize on the Gen Z trends while still maintaining, their core quality products, and without, having to revamp everything?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing here is just being authentic. Make sure to showcase your brand's personality and who you are as a brand. Like I said, those quick little videos, those behind the scenes photos, those photos of your food. The food still has to look good, but it doesn't have to look like it came out of a magazine either. So, whatever your brand's personality is, make sure you showcase that and you highlight that. Stay authentic to your brand. So if if honey sriracha or spicy flavors doesn't make sense for your food, there are other ways you can capitalize on this. If your thing is those ooey gooey decadent cookies, then play up the indulgent angle. Make your brand is going to appeal more to the indulgent side of Gen Z. So play that up. You don't have to kind of go off brand to try to chase some of these trends. That authenticity is going to be key. If you can take advantage of the functional ingredients or some of these spices and these flavors, absolutely do that. If it doesn't cost too much disruption in your brand, do it. If you can't, then lean into something that you're already taking advantage of, that you can appeal to Gen Z with, or just lean into your brand personality. Quite honestly, I mean, that's the authentic brands are really key to this generation. That's really what they're looking for, and they'll find a way to fit it into what they want. The other thing is, where you can, highlight your value perception. Those flavors, those functional benefits, the indulgence, the kind of things that Gen Z is looking for. Highlight that value that you bring to them. Hey, if you're gonna spend your hard-earned money on an indulgent treat in the afternoon, we're the ones you want, and this is why. Bringing that value perception to the forefront is going to help get their attention. And then the last thing is just facilitating that connection. And you can do this in a number of ways. If you can, engage with them on some of those alternative platforms and channels. If you can't, use Instagram, use those behind the scenes videos, use those photos to help facilitate that connection and build that trust with Gen Z. And I know a lot of our audience is heavily invested in your local communities. Play that up as well. Really take advantage of that to appeal to Gen Z. And even if it's something as simple as, hey, if our home team wins their next game against X opponent, come on in the next day for a home team inspired treat, or for 15% off your purchase, or whatever makes sense for your brand. I, really getting them in the doors is going to be key, because they're craving that in-person connection with your food. And it'll help you can help facilitate that connection, because Gen Z will understand that you're invested in what's important to them. You're invested in the community. You're invested in their school. You're invested in whatever it is. That will really help build that connection with them and build that trust.
Well, that's a lot of great advice you've giving us today. I really appreciate it. I've very much enjoyed the whole show and learned so much. And thank you for being part of the show, Emily. Thank you very much. And thank you also for joining us on Thought Leadership Thursday. And bakers, don't forget that if you want to learn more about Vantage, to check out the link below. And also remember that Bakerpedia, for all your technical baking resources, it's free to sign up. And remember to sign up for the Baker Academy today. And happy baking to all of you, and see you next time. Thank you.